Hello and welcome to In the Envelope, an awards podcast. I am your host, Jack Smart, awards editor at Backstage, the most trusted name in casting. I'm here to spotlight some of the most exciting film, television, and theater awards contenders working today. Who is in the running? What makes an awards-worthy performance? And how can you, my dear listener, win a statue of your own? We're sitting down for intimate, inspirational interviews with actors and artists to get that insider's perspective on these questions and more. It's an opportunity for some of today's most talented stars to share their craft and career advice, and maybe, just maybe, provide a tantalizing glimpse in the envelope.
I'm interested in the extent of the human experience.
Yep.
So I think that basically anthropology, psychology, sociology,
Yes.
we're all, and performing arts, we're all basically doing the same thing, just
Totally.
using different methodology.
Yeah.
But the object of my study is the human experience.
Right.
And as an actor, that's what I do.
All right, so the Tony Awards were this last weekend, so
Yes, and
give
we
me your
are
appraisal.
Backstage's In the Envelope and Awards podcast is an awards podcast. Yeah, we want to be topical, and I want to address the recent big award show. It's theater's biggest awards, the Antoinette Perry Awards, which honor Broadway's best. Yeah, they happened June 10th, and it was really fun. It was exciting.
Yeah,
I went.
very glamorous.
It was pretty glamorous, yeah. It's been many years now that I have attended. And there were a couple surprises this year, but I was very pleased, of course, to see friend of the podcast, Lindsay Mendez, win
Yes.
the Tony Award
Excellent.
for featured actress in a musical for Carousel.
I think it's down to you.
It's just because of me. It's just because of this podcast. I was so thrilled that, I mean, I know it was a really tiny season the mini season of Tony's episodes was so tiny because then we had to kind of squeeze them in before all the Emmy stuff. But it's always great to talk to theater actors. They know their stuff. And I thought those two actresses who were both nominated, they delivered just like first-rate advice to
Absolutely.
our listeners. I can't stop thinking about those interviews.
Right.
And the Tony Awards ceremony, it was a really fitting celebration of the best of Broadway. The Band's Visit did very well. It won Best Musical. Angels in America, of course, won a ton. After breaking the record for most Tony nominations ever for a production of a play, it won Best Revival, among many other things. My close friend, Nathan Lane, won a Tony Award, and I'm very pleased about that. Just kidding. He's not my close friend. Nathan, if you're listening, I love you.
And of course, now we know what shoes not to wear to a casting, thanks to Lindsay.
Yes. Talk about practical advice, right?
Yeah,
For
very.
those who haven't heard, gone back and listened to our theatery ones, if you're not a theater actor, if you're film and TV, there's still a lot you can get out of those, I think, for sure. And also, like, we've talked about voiceover and recording stuff before. All of the musical theater taking care of your voice stuff, that applies to voiceover acting for sure. None of which has anything to do with today's guest.
No, but it's current news.
Edgar Ramirez joined us on the podcast today.
Yeah, that
What a
was
treat.
great. That was.
Yeah, he, for those who don't know, he appears as Gianni Versace in FX's The Assassination of Gianni Versace, American Crime Story. I think I have that right.
Yeah.
Season 2 of American Crime Story, which is Ryan Murphy's kind of miniseries, which is all about digging up like a recent bit of pop culture history and something kind of salacious and, in this case, murdery.
I mean, it's a fascinating story as well. I mean,
who knew?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, lots of people did, but I didn't.
No, I wouldn't. No.
And watching this spectacularly made miniseries, which stars Darren Criss, Ricky Martin, Penelope Cruz, returning to TV as Donatella Versace, who's her friend.
That was brilliant
That's
casting.
brilliant, yeah. And Edgar Ramirez as the titular role, he's killed in the first 5 minutes of the first episode of the show.
Yeah.
And then it kind of works backwards to explain a lot about Gianni, but a lot also about Darren Criss's character, Andrew Cunanan, who went on a killing spree. Boy, it's dark stuff.
Yeah.
What a tragedy. It's also very, very queer. And I really liked that about the series, and I liked that about Edgar He's so perceptive and he's so intellectual.
Yeah.
He does a ton of research.
And you were telling me that he was a journalist. That's how he got his start. Yeah.
His way into acting was really interesting. He's from Venezuela.
Yeah.
And while he was involved in some filmmaking and in some acting, and he was always involved in that world, the way that he officially got into it was kind of a circuitous path. Before becoming a movie star, he's appeared in quite a few big screen projects. But now I think he's going to get some awards attention as Gianni Versace.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to jinx anything. I mean, who knows? Emmy nominations come out July 12th.
Yeah.
Hey, this is important for listeners to know. July 12th, Emmy nominations come out. And Jamie and I and Kasey and the people at Backstage, Kasey and I very much are going to be tallying which In the Envelope guests are nominated. And to boast about who made that next step. And
get ready for some furious boast tweets.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so-and-so guest on the podcast was nominated for an Emmy. It's 'cause of us. Just kidding.
At In the Envelope.
At In the Envelope on Twitter. Plug it every time you can. This was a really great for, I think this interview is good for the actors whose style of being an actor or of being a human is very brainy.
Yeah. Definitely.
People who learn that way and are really, really interested in doing intense research for a role. Edgar is a pro at that. Yet another one who I feel like who knows how far they'll climb. And it's true that for that American Crime Story, it's sad. It's tragic. I think this interview was a little bit lighter in tone.
Yeah, definitely. It had its intensity, of course, as you'd expect with Edgar, but it was a fantastic interview. So I think we should...
Let's hear it.
Have a listen to it.
Let's have a listen. This podcast is brought to you by Backstage, the world's #1 casting platform. Listen, a lot of the guests on In the Envelope, an awards podcast, used Backstage at the beginning of their careers. It's how they are now in the running for Emmy, for Oscar, for Tony, etc. If you are at the beginning of your career as an artist, here's what you do. You go to backstage.com/subscribe and enter the code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free 30-day trial. That's right, free 30-day trial if you go to backstage.com/subscribe and enter the code ENVELOPE. All you got to do then is make a profile, upload a headshot, and start applying to jobs, to the thousands of casting notices that are uploaded every day, which you can filter online to match your specific talents, your specific needs, your specific looks. Get that dream started today. Check out that free 30-day trial, backstage.com/subscribe, enter the code ENVELOPE. Let's do it. Edgar Ramirez has appeared in Carlos, Zero Dark 30, Hands of Stone, and a number of other big screen projects, all while supporting causes in his native Venezuela and across the globe as an activist with an education in political journalism. He has now brought that nuance to the title role in the Assassination of Gianni Versace, American Crime Story, Ryan Murphy's latest FX miniseries exploring the murder of the fashion mogul in the 90s. Here it is, our interview with Emmy and Golden Globe nominee, Edgar Ramirez. How's life?
Good.
Busy day?
Yeah. Yes.
Are you doing press?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it never ends with television.
I assume there's months and months with the timing of this show.
Yeah. Before, during, and after, which I
maybe
discovered
another round
doing.
In June for Emmy
doing
stuff?
television. Yeah. And it's the first time that I do it. So now I'm realizing that since you start, then you start doing press during the show, after the show, and but it's good. It's a good show. So
can't complain.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, you're promoting such an amazing show. It's jaw-dropping.
Thank you.
Everyone's talking about it.
Thank you very much.
For good reason. And I do want to get into it. But first, I want to ask you about your journalism because you are a journalist, or would you say you were a journalist?
I'm a journalist.
Yeah.
I never really goes away. Yeah.
I mean, so did you do a lot of interviews? You're very active in the political world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't interview people, not at the moment, but I used to, and I think that that eventually it is very easy for me to then jump on the other side of the the interview, and I mean, I'm very curious, so I'm always asking questions, so.
Like most
good
actors.
I have to reframe myself and kind of like, okay, you're being interviewed,
not doing the interview,
which for me is more of a having like a like a mutually discovering, conversation, which I think is what makes it even interesting for the audience.
Indeed. That's what we're going for today.
Yeah.
You studied audiovisual, I saw, or audiovisual communication.
Yeah. I mean, in my university, up until maybe because we go, I don't know, here in the U.S. it goes by semesters, or it goes by
generally,
right?
Yeah.
So by the time I was in university, it was by year. So by the time you reached the third year, then you had to decide between print journalism, public relations, so to speak, and audiovisual production. So I took audiovisual production, but I specialized in political communication. So that's why. So it was like my two big interests. It was politics on one side, and also movie making and image. Yeah, and sound.
And that movie-making side of things, you've described it as that was a hobby at first until enough people told you that this should be your career.
Exactly, yeah.
What was that? I mean, how did you make that decision?
Well, I was actually the last year of university. I suddenly, a lot of my friends were making short films and movies, like university, like student movies. And thank you very much for my coffee. And I run on.
Absolutely, same.
Yeah. So and although I was taking the same classes, for some reason I was more focused on politics and international affairs and business in the university. So my friends were making movies, and they were making student movies and short films. And then suddenly they started to ask me, Edgar, do you want to
get involved?
Yeah, you want to get involved. I mean, do you want to, help out? And that's how I got involved. And then suddenly they said, there was this friend of mine who said, Edgar, there's an experimental short film that I want to do. It was the explosion of internet at the time.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I started university typing my essays, and I ended up doing my thesis about marketing tools in internet. So it's like I'm the generation that. Actually, yeah. I mean, we were right. I mean, it's not. I'm not. Of course, I'm not millennial. I'm not a Generation X. We're right in the middle. It's the people that had a childhood and the first part of their teens in an analog way.
Totally.
And then a total digital.
You have to completely change. Yeah.
So I remember that it was the beginning of that, and then he wanted to make a short film about virtual sex.
Oh. Why?
Yeah. So very Demolition Man kind of. And then
very college, very university.
Yeah. And then he said, do you want to do it? And I said, yeah, what do I have to do? Well, you have to put on that latex suit and then make out with this girl, And then I said, okay, who's the girl? And then he showed me the girl. I said, of course, is that all I have to do? Yes, that's all you have to do. And I said, okay, perfect, let's do it. It sounds like a fun afternoon. And then I ended up doing the short film, which then got an official selection for a movie festival in my university that it was also international as well. I mean, we would invite different also students and work from students from all over the region, from all over Latin America. Long story short, there was a juror from the festival. We invited they invited people from all over Latin America as well to be part of the jurors. And there was this guy who was a very popular professor at a Mexican university.
Right.
And this guy saw me the closing ceremony because my short film ended up winning Best Experimental Short Film, and I even got a nomination as Best Actor. And all I did was all I did was just make out with this girl, and then And one day, that short film haunts me. One day it's gonna come to the surface.
Yeah, where is it?
Yeah, I have to find it. Honestly, I have to find it. I dyed my hair and everything. It was very fun.
Oh wow!
So, and it was half naked. Actually, total naked with a latex suit. Everything. It was all see through.
Yeah. What a bizarre start.
Yeah. And then again, long story short, he saw me. He said, "Edgar, I didn't know that you were an actor." And I said, "I'm not an actor. My friend asked me to do this." And,
right.
And then he said, "Because there's this movie that I'm writing and I'm also co-producing, and it would be great if you could come to Mexico and meet the director and the rest of the producers, because I think there's a good role that you could play." And I said, "Well, that would be great," but I wasn't an actor at the time.
Right.
It was hard for me to foresee it. I tried to go to Mexico, but I was doing my thesis, and I was also traveling a lot because I was actually applying to do an internship, the International Court of Justice, in The Hague, and I was
completely
my head was
different.
somewhere.
Yeah.
And that guy turned out to be Guillermo Arriaga, who turned out to be the writer of Amores Perros and 21 Grams and Babel and The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada. Yeah, and that movie was Amores Perros. So he's my mentor. He's the one. Then 2 years later, I was already working in politics in Venezuela, and then he came back to Caracas, the capital of my country. But this time he wasn't coming from Mexico. He was coming from Cannes, and the movie that he had, the possibility that he had offered me was Amores Perros.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like he had to lure you more than once.
Yeah.
And you were on another track.
Yeah, I was on another track.
You had to kind of make that decision.
And then when he came back 2 years later, he showed the trailer of Amores Perros that had just won the Critics Week at Cannes.
Yeah.
And then he showed the trailer to a bunch of friends at a friend's house, and then paused the trailer and said, "This could have been you." Oh. He pointed out to the character.
Wow.
And then that's how I make the choice. So next day we went to Central Park, the equivalent of something like Central Park in Venezuela, Kung Fu style. It was like the master and the pupil. We were walking.
That's so cool.
Side by side, and then he explained to me all the disadvantages of becoming an actor. He said, "You're gonna be out of a job. By nature, you're going to be unemployed.
What you can expect. Yeah.
By nature, one day you'll be in a play and in a theater that only 3 seats out of 500 seats will be will have people, and sometimes you'll make movies that no one's gonna see.
Yes.
Do you still want to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, why not? Let's give it a shot." And here I am.
And it's because you had that really strong mentor really pushing you, but also it sounds like being realistic about the realities of being an actor and
exactly. He actually explained all the downside of it, and he said, "Do you still want to do it?" And I said, "Yeah. I mean, what's the worst that can happen?
Totally.
Let's give it a shot." And then,
here I am. Without him, you would never have. You'd be running for office somewhere, or
I don't know about that, honestly. But yeah, it would have been. I think that in the end, I remember when I announced to my closest friends that I was going to take a leave of absence on my political work to become an actor. Some of them reacted harshly. I said, "Are you crazy? I mean, you're having you're building a great future, in this field. Why would you give it up for?" I mean, it was hard for them to understand.
Right, okay.
And I thought at the moment that maybe I was going a little crazy at the time, but first I didn't want to wonder. 20 years after, like, what if? I preferred to just, do it.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, years later now, almost 15 years since I became an actor, I realized that I'm basically doing the same thing that I wanted, like the same interest that I had, and that drove me to politics and to social studies, and it's basically. I'm interested in the extent of the human experience.
Yep.
So I think that basically anthropology, psychology, sociology, we're all and performing arts. We're all basically doing the same thing, just using different methodology.
Yeah.
But the object of my study is the human experience, and as an actor, that's what I do.
Right.
It's almost like a meta. It's almost like a meta journalism. I kind of like become the object of my interest.
Right, and you must investigate characters in that way. You must take a character and approach it almost like a journalist.
Exactly.
Like,
that's exactly what I do. Yeah.
And it is all connected to politics. Every on-screen representation of a story of a person's life, it has political meaning.
Yeah, because the thing is that there's no, cinema as as theater, of course, as literature, architecture, fashion. I mean, it's basically it's a record. It's a print. It's a picture of the times.
Yeah.
If somebody would take a picture of the two of us right now. And then show it to the people in the future, like 50 years from now, just by the way we're dressed, just by the way we maybe set up all the objects on the table, they would know.
All these clues.
They would know. They have like clues,
Yeah, and, anthropology.
Exactly. So I think that there, and of course we all live in a political moment as well. And it's always reflected, even by shying away from politics, you're setting up an agenda.
Yeah.
So the
saying
fact that
apolitical is
so it's funny. It's funny when people say things like that. I mean, funny not in a scornful way, but it's just interesting.
Yes.
I think that's the most. I think it's a better way to put it.
Yeah.
That when people say I don't mess with politics, like I don't mingle in politics.
Right.
Then you're setting up an opinion already.
Absolutely. There's your bent right there.
Exactly.
And it does seem like we're at this moment where any and all public figures are expected to engage or kind of all have that assumption where like no matter what, even if you're taking a non-stance, that's still a stance.
Yeah, it's a stance. And it's valid as well.
But especially for actors, because actors are, as you say, like they're representing different stories, different lives. And there's also just the Hollywood like fame aspect of it. Like at the beginning of that career, when you made that choice, was there also an aspect of like maybe down the line I could do real activist stuff as an actor? Or was it more like I'm going to do the struggling actor thing and hope to make a difference in some other way and not through performing arts?
It's really it's one day at a time. It's one thing at a time. Yes. I mean, it was very difficult for me to set out to become an activist or to anticipate the size of the platform that I could have. I mean, as an actor, I just wanted first to try it to see where this was going to lead me, and then actually I have been caught by surprise by the opportunities that my career as an actor has offered me to then continue the work that I set out to do when I was a political journalist and then when I worked in political communication.
Right.
So it's been a happy accident. I mean, not that I never thought about it, but I would be lying if I said I'm going to do this and I'm going to build a career so that eventually I'll do this. You never know. Yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe after 2 years I would have quit. I mean, you
exactly.
never know.
It's, as you said, one step at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you didn't have the thought of like I want to be famous for the purpose of being famous.
Yeah, I knew that fame was going to be an element.
Sure.
But definitely not the driving force.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and anyone who gets into it gets into acting for the sole purpose of being famous, I feel like those generally don't turn out well. Those stories.
Yeah, and you have to think that at the time we were actually it was the beginning of that culture.
Oh, yeah.
So it was it was just the beginning of that culture.
Yeah.
I mean, people at the time, fame was always understood. I'm talking about my generation.
The internet did change.
Yeah,
fame.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It amplified it in a way that no one could foresee.
Right.
So I came of age right at the change when fame stopped being a consequence of something remarkable that you do to become the objective of what you do. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in a time where fame was just a result. It was a result of a remarkable or a horrible talent.
Sure.
A horrible thing to do. I mean, there were people who were famous and infamous, but they were always it was always the consequence of their doings.
Of work.
Yeah. Of work or the opposite of that,
sure.
or just destruction, of creation of destruction, right?
Yeah, right.
But then precisely, towards the end of the 90s or in the mid 90s, then it started to change, and then fame became maybe it became the driving force. I mean, it's like I when I was a teenager, or even when I was in university, nobody would say I want to be famous. Like, what do you want to do when you're a grown up, or whenever you do when you grow? I want to be famous. I mean, those answers you started to get maybe in the first decade of the 21st century.
Right. It's a generational thing for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I say this without any, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation.
Totally. Yeah.
I want to be a man of my time, and I want to understand these things as well. And there are very specific reasons for that, for those type of answers and expectations, you know. And
totally.
And actually, I'm doing a show right now, the Assassination of Gianni Versace, that it's very much related to the culture of fame. I mean, Gianni, in a way,
privacy
helped to shape that culture.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You're talking about the 90s and that shift. It's depicted in such detail. You're depicting a man who had a huge say in the styles of that time period, and whose personal life, it feels like, was political, or at least that's what the show, I feel like it's one of the points that it's making, is that this mostly closeted gay man and his work were so intertwined, his personal, his professional life. And yeah, he was really famous for his work. It's interesting that you're saying about you're either famous or you're infamous for destruction, because that's what Andrew Cunanan did. He's infamous for his destruction.
Yeah.
Did you know going into this project that it would be that like juicy and complex and relevant?
I suspected it.
Yeah.
But I suspected it just because of the subjects that were, and you know, the subjects that were touching on. I mean, and it's also something very related to Ryan Murphy's work.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that one of his, most remarkable talents is to be so keen and so able to identify stories that are both dramatically gripping, and at the same time they are socially and culturally relevant.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, they speak of a zeitgeist. He really knows how to capture the spirit of time. He's a journalist as well. That's why he started off as a journalist in Miami. So we connected very well on that level, because I think there's nothing. I think that there's nothing. Although the show is very political, there's no. It is political by default. It's because of what the subjects that we're talking about, but it does not. It's not a pamphlet, which for me is so interesting and important.
Yes,
you know?
Totally.
But and that's, I think, that's the key. That's what makes it so politically interesting. That it's not trying to push or feed you with ideas. I mean, you present the facts and a reality and a point of view, and then you make your own conclusions. And for me, that's a great accident. I mean, that is the happiest accident.
And it still manages to be entertaining, which is part of the key.
Yeah.
And I do think that between the two American Crime Stories and also Feud, what he's doing is he's depicting a time period, but it's a show about now. It's a show like Versace says a lot about 2018 as much as it does about the mid-'90s. And true for People for Zoje was a show about 2017 for sure. And that's what I do love about his work, is that there are two levels to it. There's the story, and then there's like this meta, like exactly like the audience can kind of read into it what they
always when he started. I mean, I remember that the first show that caught my attention, and then I immediately became a follower of his work, was Nip Tuck. And Nip Tuck came out right at the moment where all this obsession with youth and beauty started. I mean, it was the exacerbation of. I mean, beauty has always seduced humanity, and that is inherent to our nature, for better and for worse, you know, and all different aspects of beauty. But this obsession with industrialized kind of cookie cuttered, sense of beauty, that is something that I think that Nip Tuck like really nailed.
Yeah.
You know, and
very of its moment.
Of its moment. Yeah. And that's what Ryan does. I think that's the key to his to his relevance as a producer and as a filmmaker. And
now he's one of the most powerful showrunners. I mean, showrunners didn't used to be famous. Someone was saying the other day that Shonda Rhimes and Ryan Murphy are now as big as a Steven Spielberg in many circles.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where it's trending.
Yeah.
Did you? How'd you get involved? Did you audition for the part?
No, Ryan called me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you were friends with Ricky Martin and that he got his part soon after you did. Or
Yeah, but it was completely unrelated to our friendship. I actually a couple of first times, circle this story. When I finally decided to do the series, and we said, okay, yes, let's do it. I hung up, with my work team, and outside of a gallery that I was checking out with Ricky and some friends.
Oh.
We had agreed to go and do a gallery tour, and then I got the call, and I said, okay, we're cooking good, perfect, so let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. And then Ricky was the first person I told that I was doing the series, and I said, dude, I'm doing Versace. Really? Oh, good for you, man. It's fantastic, blah, blah, blah. That's great, incredible, blah, blah, blah. And especially because, Ricky rose to super global stardom during that time.
Yeah.
So
he was probably influenced by Versace himself.
Well, at the time he was working for Armani, so he couldn't go to the shows and blah blah blah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was campaigning for Giorgio at the time. But of course, he lived in Miami. He was, he understood that time, and he was very excited. And then a week after, then Ricky he sends me a text and then says, guess who just called and invited me for dinner and then to have dinner with him. And I said, who? Ryan Murphy. And I said, you're going to be Antonio. And I said, really, he's going to offer you. Antonio is so brilliant. It's like, I could not even think about it. It's like, this is so brilliant. He's going to offer you Antonio. I'm completely sure.
Amazing.
And he said, you think so? And I said, dude, why else? But you know what? He's going to offer you Antonio. And then they got together, and then he offered him Antonio. And then he asked, who's going to play Donatella?
Yes.
And then he says, well, an Academy Award winner, an amazing actress, Penelope Cruz. And then he says, okay, Ryan, I can't lie. I'm very good friends with Edgar Ramirez, and I know that he's going to do Versace. And he says, are you guys close? Yeah, we're very good friends. And then Ryan cried. I was like, I cannot believe perfect. Like everything was so perfect.
We do have to talk about Penelope. I think one of the most brilliant things that Ryan did about this show specifically was revealing to the press that it was an Oscar winner, but not who. Like he said, I have found an Oscar-winning actress to play Donatella. And having us all guess who it was. And I don't think a lot of people really guessed Penelope. And that reveal, like he could have just said, it's Penelope Cruz, she has an Oscar. But instead he said, she has an Oscar, and waited like a week.
Yeah.
That is kind of the genius of Ryan Murphy.
Yeah, he's genius. Yeah, he knows.
And in that first episode, her entrance, it's again that level of like, she's Penelope Cruz and she's Donatella Versace.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah. Both iconic.
Both iconic, and they know each other. Do you have a relationship with Donatella as well?
With Donatella? No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
No.
What is it like to work with Penelope in this role?
She's great. There are two levels. Penelope and I had always wanted to work together, and actually we're doing a movie this year that we set out to do before we both got involved with Versace.
Cool.
So it was, again, a happy coincidence. But we hadn't met each other personally. We wanted to work together, and we're working on that film, but we hadn't really seen each other. And then, of course, when I found out that Penelope was the actress, it was, of course, I knew, even before Ricky, but I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
So, because Ryan told me. And she's so courageous. She's a very, she's a risk taker. And
cool.
And I think there's nothing sexier than that.
In
any actor. Yeah. She really goes for it. She's very, very committed, very specific, very open at the same time.
Right.
And today she's one of my best friends. We became very close, and she's like my sister. There was something very magical that it doesn't happen on every show or on every project. When you could have a great friendly relationship with your colleagues, with your coworkers, but in this case, we all became very close.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which also helped with the trust and the abandon with which we play these characters. We really trusted each other, and we really abandoned ourselves in each other while we were performing. So that really helped to build, that. I mean, these characters are very close to our hearts. I mean, we never wanted to, although, in spite of all the, the flashiness and the exuberance surrounding the story and the events leading up to his assassination and Versace's legacy and the Versace clan's aura, regardless of all the exuberance, we walked into this project with utmost respect and compassion. It was never our intention
to be campy,
or sensational or not at all.
Right.
Yeah.
You're depicting sensationalism. You're not being sensational.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the approach has been very contained, and we were all. I mean, we both Penelope, Ricky, and I. We were kids from the '90s.
Right. Yeah.
We saw that shift. That we discussed earlier, and we are Latin.
Yeah.
And Versace understood that. And Miami really helped to that. I mean, he saw, he understood clearly how Miami would become this beacon of, diversity and sensuality and sexuality and real estate potential and cultural crossroads. I mean, he knew. I mean, I think that he saw how Miami would become for the modern world at the time in the 90s, what Sybaris was for the Greek, for the ancient Greek, a place where hedonism would be the driving force.
And this is a Greek tragedy of a show.
Absolutely.
In its style.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you guys are filming in the mansion. Have you ever had an experience like that as an actor where you're in the actual place that these events took place, you're playing a person who died there? I mean, did that feel like a big responsibility to?
So interesting that so weird that you're asking that, because I have, but the first time that I experienced that was with Carlos de Jaco, the French miniseries that I did like 7 years ago, and I went to an actual location where my character killed people. So, but here I'm just realizing that it is the second time that I go through that, but then my character is the one that got assassinated.
It's murder, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so murder was involved. But the first time I was the perpetrator, and this time my character was a victim.
So are you haunted? Are there ghosts involved?
I'm Venezuelan. I'm Latin American. I believe in everything and in anything. So magic realism is pretty much a cultural thing for us.
So cool.
So.
Yeah. I would love to hear. Does that influence creating a character?
It's always a possibility. So Gianni was Catholic. Ricky, Penelope, and I were raised Catholic.
Oh, okay.
It's part of and we're Latin, so it is part of. I mean, this comfort with the unknown. It is something that is very close to us.
Yeah.
And also this comfort with expressing emotions, which I think is what unifies us as a culture. Because being Latin is not a race; it is a culture composed by many races, religions, and ethnicities. But I think that what binds us as a culture is our comfort with expressing emotions and also believing in the unknown.
Which is the two of the biggest tools as an actor that you need to
you're
craft.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that imagination. And I keep coming back to curiosity because it does seem like you are such a journalist in that way. And you must approach each character with like a curiosity about the research behind.
Absolutely.
I mean, you must have done intense research about him.
Yeah.
There's a lot to dig into.
Yeah.
Did you dig into the fashion and everything?
Everything.
It
was very important to me to understand the historical context in which Gianni Versace not only grew up, but in which he rose when he built his company in.
Right.
So that I think that he was a kid from the 70s. You know, he came of age in the 70s.
Right.
So the 70s were, and he captured that energy. The 70s were run down and sexy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the 80s were opulent and conservative.
Yes.
So this is how I see it. The glamour and sexuality were never married.
Uh-huh.
So there was always two tracks for sexuality and sensuality and being glamorous and stylish. They were never together.
Okay.
You know, fashion and glamour was something way more exclusive, only for, you know, the for ladies of high society that would, you know, would be invited to the showrooms of Balenciaga and Christian Dior and Yves Saint Laurent and then being sexy and being sexually outspoken and open,
able to express
yourself sexually through your clothes. It was a total different. It was a total different
and
track.
Not in the fashion world.
And not in the fashion world, definitely. At least not in the glamorous high-end fashion. High fashion. And Gianni was able to marry the two.
Okay.
So he took the rundown element and the sexuality of the 70s, mixed it with the money, the opulence, you know, and also the desire to break out from also the repression of all this money from the 80s.
Right.
Also was a result of all this economic explosion, and in the 90s everybody went crazy. So he was a designer for the time.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of money that there was in the world in the 90s would pale the amount of money that's in the world today would pale in comparison to the amount of money that it was in the 90s.
Right.
And we had just finished the Reagan era with all this opulence and but it was opulence with a conservative attitude towards life.
Yep.
And then in the 90s, it was explosion.
Totally.
So people had money and people wanted to express themselves sexually, and he was a designer to channel that. Yeah.
And that is empowering. I think that was a lot of his – I don't know if that was his mission so much to empower women or to empower people, but he did it through his designs.
Yeah, totally. And he wanted women to feel, as you say, empowered and to be able to express their sexuality and their desire through their clothes.
While
he elevated sexuality to high fashion.
Right.
And of course, I mean that didn't come with no opposition. I mean, there was a lot of, you know, also a huge backlash. You know, I mean, he was not accepted at the beginning by the established and so to speak uptight conservative, you know, families of fashion in Milan. I mean, he was from the South. He was always an outsider. He was always an outsider looking in. And he came from southern Italy, and for the northern Italians, especially in the fashion world in Milan, I mean, he was just this peasant, tacky guy.
Yeah, he's always going to be that.
He's always going to be that.
Right.
He's never going to be like us. He's never. And you know, he basically created a culture, on his own.
And I feel like that's such a recipe for success for so many artists is to be like a little bit on the outside. Maybe a little bit, cast aside, and to capture some moment.
He said it. I mean, he said that he actually wanted to be a music composer.
Right.
But then his mother basically told him, "Okay, no, we have this workshop, we have this atelier, and you're great at sewing, so you do this." And then basically for him, the craft was easy because he had the talent and he grew up in it. But he was an artist that chose fashion design as his field of expression, but had he been exposed to other forms of other crafts of artistic expression, he would have also pursued. Yeah, and then you can see that's why you can see so many forms of art and entertainment mix, you know, with his work.
Yeah,
you know, I mean,
he multidisciplinary. He was multidisciplinary artist.
I mean, he created this culture for this culture of this mix between fashion and music and rock and roll and cinema and literature and painting. You know, he was the first fashion designer to use opera, you know, in his runways.
Yeah. Cool.
So I mean, he was the first one to use Puccini, as the background music for his shows. There was that now sounds like that's like the rule, but at the time it was pretty revolutionary.
Yeah. So you're all about putting yourself in the moment of I love that idea of you're not just thinking about him in the 90s. You're certainly thinking about exactly what it was like to be his age in that year in Italy, and then his age when he was having that breakout success.
Yeah.
That's how you get into character, is you essentially, do you work backwards from the script almost back to
because for me it is very, especially with biographical characters, with characters that exist or have existed, it is very important for me to first understand the historical context. I need to understand the era first. The era where these characters played out, and then as some sort of like a second circle would be their lives and their family, and then their friends. And I was lucky enough to I tracked down people who were not member of his family, because for legal reasons we couldn't do it, and I wouldn't really go through it. I mean, it's like it was a horrible tragedy what this family went through, so I didn't want to even try to bring this up. I mean, it's like I didn't want to try to talk to Donatella or any other member of the family.
Right.
But I did try to find out people who were close to him and see if they were willing to open up to me anonymously. Meaning that I know who they are, but without me revealing, because as any journalist, I would never reveal my source.
There you go, yeah.
And then I was very lucky to find people who were very close to him and were able to open up and to share their thoughts and their feelings and what they saw and what they felt from Gianni at the time.
And does that...
So that was like the three...
that inspires you.
Yeah, that inspires me. And of course, I read a lot of literature written on him and his documentaries and his books and his designs. And in this case, I wanted to really educate myself on the craft.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever get in that weird position where you're doing the real life research and you're talking about this real life person, and then you find something that actually contradicts the script, or that you are in a scene and you realize, oh, this dynamic I have learned in the real world is not the way it's written here.
It's happened, yeah.
And you have to reconcile that.
Yeah, but I've been very lucky to work with very,
the most thorough writers.
Yeah. And also people who are they're amazing writers and also and directors and also very open people. So I would come and also share the knowledge or the results of my research with them.
Very
and
cool.
That's what I did also on the show.
And then I love that idea that you get onto set and you let that familiarity with the unknown and with your imagination kind of take hold. That's what you're doing in specific scenes with your partners.
That's
all the research is there, and then you kind of let go.
Oh,
right?
well, definitely. I mean, you do all this work, and then you pour it into the script, and then you let it go.
Cool.
And then you put it on the back of your head, and then just let it drive you.
Yeah, and you just listen to your scene partners.
Yeah, exactly.
And stare into their eyes. And
because in the end, also when you're playing characters like this, whose lives will always be somehow in the twilight, of things, because of course we've been very thorough about everybody has about the investigation and the research and also the respect that with which we walked into this. But in the end, the real truth, what is the truth? I mean, the truth is a sphere.
Yeah,
It's a sphere. Like the moon, there's always a hidden face, and there's one that gets hit by the light, and then there's always a hidden face, and then and the truth always keeps turning and turning and turning, and then you reveal another face, and then another one goes in the shadow. That's the truth. I mean, that's how I imagine the truth in general, as a concept. So we would never know what was Gianni thinking, what was crossing his mind. You never know, but at least you take the elements, the good writing, the compassion, and you just also make it creative and try to put yourself in those shoes and in those circumstances, and just let also your empathy do the work.
Okay.
Because in the end, in the end, this is, I mean, acting is nothing but a true act of empathy.
Yes.
You try to, with all its light and with all its darkness, you just try to empathize
totally.
with that. Yeah.
And then we as an audience do that same thing where the light catches on the moon in a specific way for us, and we interpret what Gianni is thinking maybe in a given moment based on our own stuff. We're doing the same like act of interpretation of this value and refracting it through our own selves as an audience. And you're doing that as an actor. And I love the idea that you're saying that is liberating in a way, because it's just about you have to bring yourself to it. It's your take. And you're just refracting what you perceive to be. I love the idea that it's a never-ending target in a way.
It's a never-ending, exactly.
Yeah. And you can't possibly capture the objective reality of what happened, nor would you want to try. So it's not really going to get
because
you
there's nothing objective about the human experience.
Right.
And that has been, I think, the failure and the mistake of many social sciences. I mean, we cannot analyze, we cannot grab the human experience with antiseptic gloves and try to dissect our extent as human beings as we were dealing with matter. You know, or we can apply scientific methods.
Yes.
To certain extent, but there's nothing objective about the human experience.
No. Right.
The human experience is composed by many, and hopefully more and more different subjectivities. Yeah. And then that will give you an idea of what, you know, that would give you a set of references. But as a journalist, I don't try to report. I don't think that objectivity it is a value as a journalist. I think that being broad and being tolerant and being open to other opinions and to other subjectivities, that is a value as a journalist. Gotcha. And that is a value as an actor as well, I think.
Amazing.
But not trying to be objective. I think there's trying to be objective when it comes down to human phenomena. I think that is a lost battle.
It totally is. I mean, it's so funny you're saying that, because I feel like my purpose maybe on this podcast is to get actors to boil down what they do to a science. And it's just not possible. I love that, you can't put on surgical gloves and have you explain to me exactly what's going through your head in a specific moment, all of the preparation that led to some specific moment on this show. It's more about like listeners of this podcast have to just listen to what you're saying and absorb it. And
I mean, I do believe in doing the homework. I mean, I do believe in the homework because it is fun for me.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I enjoy doing research. For me, it is interesting, and it is fascinating to do it, and I want to be changed after a character. I think that is the ultimate experience. I mean, I want to have the patina of the experience attached to my body and then on to the next character. I'm changed after Versace, and I was changed after my last character before Versace, and it's like you want to keep expanding. Yeah. As you know, your emotional and intellectual horizon, you want them to keep expanding through your characters. Totally. And I enjoy doing the homework. And there are other actors that and then I do all the homework and I just put it in the back of my head and just open up to the experience to what's because you discover your character also in relation to other characters. I discovered Gianni because of Penelope playing Donatella, and then Penelope discovered Donatella also in relation to Gianni and with Antonio played by Ricky Martin. We did that. Totally. We came with some ideas. But then we threw those ideas, in the scene, and then boom, some combustion happened. You're learning about the characters. You're learning about the story. Yeah, because we're also the result of our relationships. We are the result of the impact that other people have in you. Yeah. So we are all interconnected, and we're all shaped not only by our experiences, but also by the people that are that surround us, and the same thing happens with characters. Absolutely, and it sounds like that's what you've taken from this role. Like, is that what are you going to take from this project into the next Gianni was he was like the sun. He was the sun, and he had all these planets orbiting around him.
Mm-hmm.
And once he went away, all this universe collapsed.
Yeah.
I think that the thing, the aspect that has moved me the most was how family-oriented he was, and how able he was to create a world and a culture that it was so over the top for some people,
right,
but so fascinating for some others. I include myself in that group. It was fascinating. He you know, normally when we think about the Roman Empire, we tend to think about this washed out, kind of like beige marble, kind of like white mausoleums and temples and statues with robes. But the reality is that the Roman Empire was very bright and colorful. It's only the patina of time and the years that have washed out all those colors. But the gold was bright, and the blues were intense, and the magenta was explosive, and the colors, it was very, very colorful. And he reinterpreted the 90s through the Roman Empire.
Yeah, cool.
So in a way, he created his own fantasy of being an emperor in his world. But deep inside, he was a craftsman. That would go to bed rather early and that would wake up very early, and he was a workaholic. But he created all this fantasy for the rest of us.
Totally.
But it wasn't really the way he lived his life. He was way more private and way more calm and shy that people would ever imagine. When we think about Versace, in the same way that we think about the Roman Empire, is the lush, you know, the lush and the parties and the orgies and the feasts, you know, and the color and the excess, and the excess. But Gianni was actually, according to
what you found,
what I found, he was actually pretty much the opposite. I mean, he wanted to create that world. So he was a true artist and created that world.
See, I think that's what many of us expected from this series, is we maybe thought it would be, you know, loud and flashy and campy. And those elements are in there, but it's not being depicted by the characters, and the character dynamics are the most important part, I think, of the story.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's really a tragedy, because it really is also about this guy who just comes in and blocks out the sun.
Yeah, I think that one thing that I take away from this experience and from playing Gianni is his optimism. He was an optimist, and he really fought for his vision. You know, and that is something that is very inspiring.
Absolutely.
And he was very convinced of his vision, and he really fought really hard.
Yeah.
And he wanted also to bring people in and invite them to share his vision, and that is I don't know. It's fascinating. I think it's still early for me to know exactly how this character changed me.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
for sure, my sensitivity expanded. You know, and of course, I would never look at couture in the same way that I used to, because now I know how much work goes into it. You know, and how personal. I mean, I've always felt a lot of respect. I like fashion, and I like, because I like design, and in general.
Sure.
So, and I love history.
Yeah, which all plays into
that.
Totally.
So, and Gianni did also. So we kind of like connect there, like on a personal level. I mean, I connected to the character on a personal level, and it was a very personal thing to make a dress, and to him it was a very personal thing to make a dress. I mean, it's like you would. There's a beautiful anecdote. I can't remember the details very well, but I think that it was somewhere in the 19th century. I read it through, you know, during the research, and also talking to the writer, and I think that it was part of one of the, I think it was in the script. I think it was one of the lines in the series, in the end. It ended up being, you know, on the script. that lovers, you know, they would the lovers they would attach hair to either the letters and also to the medals they would give to other lovers, so that you know that I'm giving you a part of you, you know. And then some designers would even put their own hair in the dresses, so as a manifest of how close and how personal, how organic this dress was to them.
And like you said earlier, that it's a record of a moment in time too. It's a record of a.
And I think that we as performers also need to do that.
I mean,
you cannot really gain anything without giving anything up.
Right.
You know, you have to become one with the character, and there's a moment in the process. Any actor, I'm sure that any actor can identify with this. There's a moment that you become one, and you're losing something, you're giving something to it, and you're also gaining something. So I do believe in that risk. I do believe in that exchange. You know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, what a feast of a role for an actor. I mean, any actor, to be given this so much research to sink your teeth into and all of that.
Thank you.
This has been awesome. Any parting words of wisdom for those at the beginning of their acting career, those aspiring performers out there?
I mean, first of all, take any advice lightly.
That's good advice in and of itself,
Yeah, because each career is different. You know, I think that more than taking the advice, take the intention. Take the intention and the feeling behind the advice.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Because also every advice also comes with a whole set of experiences and victories and failures. So I think it's more about the energy than the advice itself. I don't know if it makes sense, but I think that it's more about even sometimes when a director is directing you and you feel confused because of what he or she is telling you, like it's giving you like contradictory directions.
Which happens
forget
a lot
about the direction. Focus on the energy.
Yeah, okay.
Focus on the energy of the director. Because the energy is what's going to give you the clue.
Yeah, okay.
Because we don't have to all to be articulate and know exactly what we want.
Right.
But the energy is unmistakable.
Yeah.
The energy is what you need to put attention to put your focus on.
Totally.
And I think that's and I think that is the same when it comes down to advice.
Sure.
Advice, like take the energy of the advice.
Yeah, wow.
And try to interpret that. And do I don't know, do the homework. And I don't know, for me, try to I think that doing the homework and trying to really get deep into the research is going to make you grow so much. You know, because that is your only private experience, and then you take that homework on set, and then you let the magic happen. But I would say be prepared.
Excellent.
Be prepared, but not in a way like be prepared for battle. No, be prepared for fun. You know, I mean, be prepared to really let the fire, let the creative combustion happen on set. You know, to have more resources to say, okay, it didn't work this way. Okay, we try another one. What's the problem? I mean, there's no tragedy in having a bad take.
Right.
Just
take risks. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Excellent advice. That was excellent, like philosophical and really practical advice too. I've never thought of advice as direction. That they're kind of the same thing in a way. You're on set or you're in an audition. The director says one thing to you. Sometimes if you don't understand, you can listen to the way they're telling you.
Just take the energy.
Yeah.
I mean, even when you talk to somebody. When you talk to somebody and somebody tells you something, focus on the energy. Don't focus on the words. Yeah. The words are only one level.
Yeah, and they're always futile. You can't capture exactly what you mean with words. A lot of the time. Yeah. Well, what a great way to end.
Thank you.
Thank you, Edgar. This is great.
No, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
In the Envelope, an awards podcast, is recorded at Lotus Productions, Hyperbolic Audio, and Big Yellow Duck in New York City, and Soundbox LA, Mark Grouse Studios, and Buzzies in Los Angeles. Like, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, and follow us on Twitter at In the Envelope. Thanks as always to producer, editor, and all-around podcast extraordinaire Jamie Muffett, and thank you to the team at Backstage, the most trusted name in casting. That's Peter Rappaport, Rawaan Alkhatib, Francis Ramos, Caitlin Watkins, Lauren Routt, Mark Stinson, and especially Kasey Howe. For more awards and industry coverage, head over to Backstage.com. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time for another glimpse in the envelope.